Welcome back to Clearly Established. I'm your host and Texas civil rights attorney, Brandon Grable. I recently saw a clip, or really, I guess, a series by John Oliver, where he talks about body cams and the failure of transparency. It actually was a quite intriguing and interesting topic, and I want to go through that with you now and talk about it. Let's get going.
Devices that give us a nipple's eye view of law enforcement's interactions with the public. They are ubiquitous now, but body cams are still fairly new. As recently as 2013, only a third of police departments had them, but by 2020, 79% of officers reported working in...
That's actually insane that even today, by today's standards, considering how cheap cameras are, that only 79%, at least back in 2020, of police departments have body cameras. I was aware of some issue, actually a case I'm currently working out of the city of El Paso, where even later than that, I want to say 2021, 2022, El Paso, one of the largest cities in Texas, or largest police forces, didn't have body cameras because city council didn't want to pay for it.
Departments with body-worn cameras. To the point, it's been said that they represent the largest new investment in policing in a generation. And body cams have been viewed as a popular solution to problems regarding transparency in law enforcement, which may be why a key Democratic demand right now for ending the shutdown of funding to DHS involves this catchy phrase.
We want there to be masks off, body cameras on.
Masks off, body cameras on.
We want masks off, body cameras on.
Stirring stuff. That is the leader of the opposition there, and that is truly the best he's got. Honestly, you could set a white noise machine to fiery Chuck Schumer speech and get a full 8 hours.
And I'll say this over and over, you know, for Congress to be calling for something like that, right? They have the ability to do it. Write the bill, present it to the floor, get a vote on it. Don't just get in front of the camera and talk and, you know, talk a big game and expect us to eat it up and, you know, let the media spread the word. You are actually in a position to do something about it. So if you want more accountability or want to mandate body cameras, then mandate it. Don't just talk about it. It sounds like good fodder, but to me, the words are empty. They will not do anything about it. They're not going to do anything about it. And it's just going to be an issue until someone comes along in that office, holds that office, and actually requires it.
And the truth is, body cams can seem like a great tool for increasing accountability and building trust, and cops themselves tend to value them too, though for slightly different reasons than the rest of us, as for them, it's more about reducing frivolous or false complaints. In fact, according to a 2018 survey, while just 34% of local...
And it's also critical to show how many complaints that are dismissed as frivolous are actually legitimate, right? Take, for example, what Lackluster did with Corpus Christi, right? Lackluster did this video, and in response, Corpus Christi Police Department released a statement, released the video. I'm not sure why they released the video when Lackluster already did it, but they were forced to respond. They were forced to do it. So obviously the goal of body camera is to put the objective picture out there for everyone to see, everyone to judge. That's the true meaning of transparency.
Police and sheriff's offices said they acquired body-worn cameras to reduce use of force. Nearly 80%.
That's insane. To get body cameras to reduce the use of force, essentially saying, so 1/3 of sheriff departments acknowledge that their officers will beat the crap out of somebody if nobody's watching. That's essentially what that report says.
Wanted them in order to do things like improve officer safety, increase evidence quality, reduce civilian complaints, and reduce agency liability. And look, ideally, you can have all of those things. In fact, as this police captain in Virginia sees it, the best case scenario for body cams is them improving everyone's behavior.
When a camera is present, everyone acts a little bit better. So perhaps this is an opportunity for us to de-escalate an incident. If something is very, very escalated, it'll be a reminder to everyone involved, to include the officers and the public, that a camera is present, and hopefully that we all are acting a little bit better, a little more civil to each other.
There's actually some real science behind that.
It makes sense that people would act differently when there are other people watching. You have more motivation to go looking for a recycle bin for your empty water bottle if there's someone staring at you the whole time silently and also kind of creepily judging you. But it turns out we might also act differently when it's just a picture of eyes watching us. It's called the watching eyes effect. One way researchers study this effect is by having people play special economic games, like the dictator game, which weirdly enough does not involve ruling North Korea. In the game, one person gets to decide, or dictate, how much money to keep for themselves and how much to give a partner, who is usually anonymous. In 2005, researchers from UCLA had 248 people play the game, some with a drawing of eyes as the computer screen background, and others with a different image. People who saw the eyes tended to be more generous and give more money to their partner. The effect has been replicated in everyday settings too, where pictures of eyes resulted in things like fewer bike thefts and more people paying for drinks on an honor system. Psychologists think the watching eyes effect is like the baby version of what happens when there are actual people watching. We tend to be more pro-social, meaning we voluntarily do things that benefit society as a whole, like being more generous. That probably has to do with building a good reputation.
Maybe this is why police officers don't like it when people of the public film them, because they don't have control over that information, and maybe they didn't want their conduct to be seen. You see the problem there?
Well, that certainly sounds nice, doesn't it? Still, that notion that body cams can be a way of calming down interactions with law enforcement is appealing, and it may be why it seems we're about to slap them on the chests of all ICE agents across the country in the name of accountability. But the thing is, the more you look into body cams, the more you realise they are only effective if they are used properly, and in many cases, they are just...
The biggest issue that I've always had, who controls the data? Well, it's the police departments, right? Whether, if I ask for body camera and discovery, I have to go, first and foremost, if there's not a lawsuit, I have to do an open records request. They're going to fight me tooth and nail. But of course, if the officer is portrayed in a light that they think is positive, they'll release it for everyone to see without any hurdles whatsoever. But if they realize that their officer is viewed in a negative light or not a so favorable light, it'll never see the light of day unless, of course, you file a lawsuit and then you get discovery, which is a lot more open than, say, trying to get an open records request, right? Because at the end of the day, it's up to the discretion of the police department. And then what's their retention policies? Can the data be manipulated? There's all these things where nobody, even in litigation, nobody can give me clear answers on these things.
Just not. So given that tonight, let's talk about body cams. And let's start with the fact that straight away, there are certain limitations to what they can tell us, as because of their field of view, they can't capture the full context of everything going on. And while I think you...
That's intentional. Do you think that's intentional? Here, I'll do a quiz here. Do police departments purposely get these narrow field of view body cameras so we purposely can't see everything?
Probably already get that. Just watch as this Today Show reporter demonstrates it in the weirdest possible way.
Seth is putting on a body camera. My producer, Giovanna, is off to the side, shooting from a distance on her iPhone to give us the complete picture like a bystander would. Scenario 1, something Seth calls deceptive intensity. Watch this body camera footage closely. What's happening here? All right.
Yeah, and at the same time, these officers are trained to accuse people of resisting, or not really accuse them, but instructing them not to resist. So when you see videos like that and they're saying stop resisting or don't resist, the obvious implication is they're resisting. But we know it's a lie. It's made up.
Now let's look from the bystander's iPhone. That's right. No brawl here, just really bad dancing.
Okay, I will admit that demonstration was effective, because the body cam footage did look like a violent brawl, when we now know they were in fact doing a Richard Simmons workout at each other.
And there's other points to that too, where I've had cases where police officers will be going through a suspect's phone, and the police officer is completely aware of where their body camera is and what it's picking up, and they will purposely hold the device below the camera so you can't see it. Thankfully, there's other cameras around that were able to substantiate that issue. So These guys know exactly the limitations of the technology of their specific cameras. It needs to change.
Officers were wearing body-worn cameras, and they were chasing after an individual.
He walked over to the sidewalk and lay down on the sidewalk, spread-eagled.
You can hear on the body-worn camera footage officers screaming, stop resisting, stop resisting.
It's just their training. And I'll say this. Officers don't have a right to assault you. You need to listen to them, not because the Constitution says so, but because courts give them authority to beat the crap out of you if the inference or perception is that you are in fact resisting. Courts have said time and time again, they don't second guess police action sitting in a comfortable chair in judges' chambers, right? They're going to take these decisions. Now, obviously, there's recent changes in the case law, right, that still say you need to look to the totality of circumstances. But the reality is these officers are trained and fully aware that those totality of circumstances matter and can be manipulated right there on the scene, as we can see.
A similar situation happened in the beating death of Tyree Nichols, where the audio on officers' body cams picked them up saying things like lay flat, only for another video to emerge showing him lying limp as an officer handcuffed him. The point is, there are immediately limits to what a camera can show you, but those limitations get even more acute when cops mute, obscure, or...
If you know that, I know that, John Oliver knows that, media knows that, why don't courts know that?
turn off their cameras, which happens, and sometimes on purpose. And that is something driven home by this incident, where a police captain who was arrested for drunk driving kept urgently trying to convey something to the officer who pulled him over.
Been drinking tonight? I just got a ride.
You've been drinking tonight, sir?
I'm a captain of the police department.
What police department?
Oklahoma City.
How much we had to drink tonight, sir?
So even drunk, these officers remember their training, what they're told about body cameras. But when you get them under oath and you ask all the questions about their knowledge of the limitations and ability of the body camera, they have no idea, right? It's interesting.
Huh? I'm not turning my camera off.
Okay.
If you asked an officer to turn their camera off, what do you think would happen to you? I bet you it would be a lot worse than whatever happened to this captain.
You should know most body cams are basically always in a standby mode in which the camera is powered on and rolling, but not yet permanently saving the footage. It's only when an officer presses record that the camera will begin saving footage to permanent memory. That saved clip then includes footage recorded for a predetermined amount of buffer time before the record button was pressed, which can range from 15 seconds to 2 minutes. So there's actually a meaningful...
A lot of times I've seen about 30 seconds, but you're not going to get the audio until that officer actually pressed the record button.
Amount of context that can get captured prior to an officer hitting record if that's something they're inclined to do. And yet oftentimes they just happen to be turned off during incidents of police violence. For example, even though the LAPD requires officers to turn on their cameras before any interaction with the public, nearly a fourth of its officers involved in incidents where serious force was used failed to activate them in a timely manner.
Yeah, that's not uncommon. That still happens today, and there's just simply no accountability for it, right? In terms of constitutional violations, the court's going to say it's not violating your rights if they didn't have their camera activated, right? That's purely a department policy issue if there's no actual law governing that requirement. And if there is a law, you have to look at, okay, they violated the law, so what? Is it a penalty? Do they get charged? Do they get fired? Could they be held civilly liable?
Activating a body camera isn't exactly an overwhelming task. We looked into it, and the process is: step 1, press the record button. Step 2, end of steps.
Crazy.
But even if an officer does turn on their camera, and even if it shows what happened clearly, there's still the issue of what happens to all the footage. Because to be clear, there is an enormous amount of it. To give you a sense of scale, Axon, the nation's largest police camera provider, offers cloud storage for many of its clients' footage, and its database is more than 100 petabytes of footage, equivalent to more than 5,000 years of high-definition video.
That's insane. And obviously, I think they're going to take the same position as Flock, if you've seen my Flock videos, that they don't have access to the data. What is interesting is I have messed around. I've been able to mess around a little bit with the Axon, I guess, front-facing database. And there's a button there. You know, I'm going to try to see if I can incorporate this in one of my cases, but there's a button that says Edit Metadata. I wasn't able to do anything with it, but I'm curious to see if police departments are, and what exactly can they edit?
Most of that footage will never be watched by anyone, which is understandable.
True.
You know, it's impossible for agencies to look at every minute of footage from all these cameras, but
and I guarantee you the most damning videos, they're going to try their hardest to make sure doesn't see the light of day, right?
Too often, even footage that documents misconduct isn't meaningfully reviewed, meaning departments miss opportunities to spot both problem officers and broader patterns of abuse. After the murder of George Floyd, it emerged that body cams had captured Derek Chauvin kneeling on the necks of others, including a handcuffed black woman and a 14-year-old black boy. In both those cases, supervisors had access to the recordings, yet cleared Chauvin's conduct. And when a state civil rights investigation later looked at...
And I want to talk about that a little bit. I don't necessarily think it's about whether or not it was captured on camera and that's why someone was cleared. In my experience, anytime there's a use of force, right, so San Antonio, for example, their officers, if there's a use of force incident, they're required to report it up to their supervisor, regardless if there's ever a complaint. And in most instances, I'd probably say literally 99% of the instances, the officer is cleared, and that's just based on the officer's report or the officer's verbal statement made to the supervisor. In instances where I've actually litigated this, a lot of times the supervisor and that supervisor's supervisor, they all say, oh no, I never watched the video. And they end up just kind of passing the buck, right? The top of the chain who makes the ultimate decision. They're looking at the first line supervisor and they're saying, oh no, I expected him to watch the video. And if he cleared the officer of misconduct, then I'm allowed to rely on that. Well, then the big question comes, why the heck are you even in the chain then if you're not going to take it seriously and you're just going to rubber stamp it?
700 hours of body cam footage. It found Minneapolis cops repeatedly used neck restraints and concluded that if police or the city had conducted a substantive audit of the footage, they would have seen how often officers there were using neck restraints and could have taken steps to stop it. And clearly, someone should have done that. Because there's no point in the police just stacking up thousands of hours of footage that nobody's ever going to see. Internally, departments aren't reviewing their own footage nearly enough. And when it comes to public transparency, the results have been all over the map.
Again, because there's no requirement for them to do so. The only time they may actually watch a clip is if there's criminal charges, and obviously they're going to think there's already enough to go after the guy, right? The other instance is if they want to make their officer look good. The other instance may be if you do a FOIA request, right? They'll watch the video and they'll make a determination internally whether or not they want that seeing the light of day. And then the other thing is in discovery, right? Whether there's litigation and they're a party or not a party, but then they're subpoenaed. Outside of those circumstances, these things probably don't get looked at. You would actually be surprised about the amount of officers that will write their reports following an incident without actually reviewing their body cameras. They just go based on memory. That's how they explain mistakes or misrepresentations or how they left critical facts out. They didn't think to go back and watch their body camera. So what's the purpose of them wearing it to begin with?
But police departments can have a huge amount of leeway when it comes to what they release, as in most places, policymakers have defaulted to leaving them with the power to decide what's recorded, who can see it, and when.
And that needs to change, right? These things need to be available for the public. If these law enforcement officers are out in the public, they're recording public events, it needs to be open for anybody and everybody, especially if there are questions about how an incident transpired. And the thing that frustrates me the most, honestly, is when you have these departments go on to their Facebook pages, they will post mugshots, they'll post their own little narrative about how somebody screwed up while also saying, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but they've already spun the story. They're already putting it out there. But then when I go and I ask for body camera footage, they're going to fight it. They're going to say, oh no, we can't interfere with the investigation. Why? Because the truth is inconsistent with your narrative?
Just watch as a reporter asked Charlotte's then police chief how to reconcile his commitment to transparency with his department's refusal to release video of a...
Oh, this is good. I think every police department, what you're about to see, I think every police department takes the same approach. I kid you not. When you hear it, you'll see what I mean.
Police shooting.
Get mixed messages here. On the one hand, you're saying we should have full transparency. On the other hand, you're saying you're not going to release the video. How can you square those two things? They're obviously, I view full transparency is release the video so we can all see it.
Sure, I appreciate your passion, but I never said full transparency. I said transparency, and transparency is in the eye of the beholder.
Wait. Transparency is in the eye of the beholder? That is just fully nonsense. Yet that has been the de facto stance of many departments. For example, even though in 2020 the NYPD promised to release footage of critical incidents within 30 days, when ProPublica looked into it 3 years later, they found that out of 380 such incidents, the NYPD had released footage within a month just twice.
Again, you're expecting a police department to be consistent with their own policies. If they don't follow their policies, who cares? Nobody's going to do anything about it, right? And I get a lot of calls all the time. Well, the department failed to do X, Y, and Z. Well, how does it violate your rights, right? That's why we care. As a civil rights attorney, that's why we care. But if a department's not doing anything about it, the city council's not going to hold them accountable. The legislature says there's nothing you can do about it. At the end of the day, that means the court's not going to touch it either. And you have to do something, right? Demand change from your city council. Make it public. Force some kind of response to it.
Even if footage gets released, it can be so heavily redacted, it's then essentially useless. For example, until last year, Tempe, Arizona's police department had a policy which mandated that all body cam footage they released would include a general medium blur. And just so you know, this is what their blurred footage looks like.
Hashtag
and it is notable that when body cam footage shows officers in a bad light, they will often cite the cost and technical hurdles of redaction to not release it. But when it shows them in a good light, those problems seem to disappear. Just watch as a reporter in Texas...
I want you to think about that. Every time you see a Facebook post or a social media post where a police department is going out of their way to release body camera footage, I want you to ask, why is that? Because that is unusual, right? And it's probably because they think their officer looks good, that their officer's actions are justified. And I don't think that should be the exception. That should be the rule, that police departments, especially if there's any public interest whatsoever, they just need to release the footage. Let the public see it. That's, again, transparency.
In front of a police chief who was claiming that because they didn't have the ability to redact video themselves, they couldn't release a video of a police search during a traffic stop.
In the year 2024, why doesn't this department have software to redact videos?
It's really expensive for us to get.
Angleton Chief Lupe Valdez showed us a quote from their body cam vendor, more than $14,000.
But why?
If you're being told that, hey, city council is going to approve you to get body cameras, go get the best, sweetest deal you can, right? The ones that allow you to mute 3 different ways, the most narrow field of view. But to sit there and tell me you spend that much and you don't know how to redact or edit,
It's not in our budget to do that.
But there's this body cam video Angleton police released a few months ago of a crash where officers heroically pulled the driver out of the burning car. And look, portions are blurred.
How were you able to redact the video in that case? We paid somebody to do that. So let me get this straight.
So when the department wants to make themselves look good and they say they don't have the capability to redact or release it, they will go out of their way to pay somebody to redact it so they can release it, so they can look good. But if you want it because you're entitled to that information, at least in Texas, under a Texas Public Information Act, they're going to say because of the limitations, they're not going to help you out.
And your officers are heroes, you find a way to release it, but when your officers are scrutinized, you find a way to withhold it? No, sir. That's what happened here, Chief. No, sir.
Yes, sir. That is...
I wouldn't be surprised if that reporter ended up arrested after this.
That's exactly what happened. That interview could not have been any more embarrassing for that man, which is why I'm sure he'd prefer if we blurred him right now. But I'm not going to do that because, much like him, I only pay people to redact video when I fucking feel like it. But maybe no case illustrates the extent to which the mere presence of body cams isn't sufficient to prevent police violence or indeed bring accountability, more than that of Ronald Green, a Louisiana man who died following an encounter with police in 2019. Officers initially told his family that he died on impact after crashing his car at the end of a chase with police. And even though...
So let's walk through that, okay? So the initial story, right? Now keep in mind, before body cameras, this would be the only story. The initial story was that this individual died on impact after crashing. They knew there was video. So they did one of two things. One, they hoped that video would never see the light of day and they were going to stick to their own narrative because that's how policing has been for generations. Or two, they didn't take the time to watch the video and they wanted to spin this right away because they knew that there would be questions immediately about how someone died.
There was body cam footage from officers on the scene. State officials, including the then governor, repeatedly refused to publicly release it for more than 2 years.
That is insane. 2 years. They knew that they were operating on a false story and they refused to release the information to the public. It's unacceptable that this police department thought they could operate that way. But again, if there's no teeth to hold them accountable for their conduct, what's stopping them from acting that way?
In the end, someone wound up leaking the video to the AP, which is how people came to see a troop.
That's why whistleblowers are so essential to be able to let us know what's going on, because they recognize from inside that, hey, this isn't right. We need to get that out. I can definitely get behind that.
Wrestling Green to the ground, putting him in a chokehold and punching him in the face. And I'm not going to show you the video of any of that, but I do think it's worth seeing one moment from one of the officers' body cams.
So they knew from the beginning that they killed this guy, and then they proceeded to tell the family that he died in an accident. And as we just seen from the Supreme Court, they're going to have no interest in changing qualified immunity or doing anything, and that family's going to have to find a case that says the conduct violated clearly established law. The fight is stacked against them every step of the way, and in the end, they lost a loved one.
As he drove away from the scene.
I beat the ever-living fuck out of him, choked him and everything else trying to get him under control, and then all of a sudden he just went limp. Damn. Yeah, I thought he was dead. We set him up real quick. He's on the ambulance en route to Glenwood, and I'm hauling ass trying to catch up to him.
You think y'all got no body cam?
And they wanted to keep this locked away forever, and they probably would have, but for the whistleblower.
Yeah. As soon as he was reminded his body camera was on, he turned it off, which is pretty damning. It is honestly the panicked move of...
It's what they're trained to do. Delete the mute button, get rid of it, and then make sure the data is preserved. Those are the two critical things right there.
Those aren't necessarily bad ideas, but they're likely to fall flat if they aren't combined with clear, enforceable rules stating the footage must be retained, routinely reviewed, and released in a timely manner, especially in critical incidents.
I also want to point out that, believe it or not all 50 states require that their officers wear body-worn cameras. They're still leaving it up to cities or police departments locally. And I think that's insane, and that needs to change. Everybody should want accountability. Everybody should want transparency. If anything, we can use the same talking points that have been pushed with body cams in the beginning. Help legitimize complaints. It'll actually help provide objective information and evidence. It could actually help preserve liability issues too. If the body cam shows that the officer did everything they were supposed to do, then they're off the hook. But if it's going to be a he said, she said, that's what's called in law a genuine issue of material fact. And it means a jury has to decide who's telling the truth. And in today's day and age, I think a jury would be quite suspicious of a police officer that engaged in some conduct and wasn't wearing a body camera. At this point, I think all states just need to mandate it. Let's start there, square one.